Continuing on from my video on USS West Virginia, this Sunday's video will take a quick look at her sister ship, the unfortunate USS Washington BB-47, turned into a target and sent beneath the waves before getting a chance to even be finished. While her namesake would forge a legend of her own, this Washington is all but forgotten if you aren't studying naval history. How many people know that there were 4 Colorado-class battleships, after all? This will be a relatively short video, as there is very little concrete information to go off here. Or, at least, it will be a short video if you only care about the hard historical information. As I said in the West Virginia video, I have yet to find any sort of firm, well-cited source on why she was cancelled. I can make fairly well-educated guesses, based off what I have been able to find, but let me put this in imaginary capital letters. This is all speculative, founded on logical assumptions and what I do feel to be the most likely scenario, but again, this is all speculation. As I said before, if someone can find a firm source on why she was chosen for target duty, by all means, let me know. I would be happy to do a corrected video because I love finding new information on historical topics. Good? We understand this is speculation, even if well-founded speculation? Let's get into it. I'll begin with the firm historical information and then do the speculation, so if you only care for one or the other, you'll have it in different parts of the video. USS Washington, BB-47, was laid down as the third of the Colorado-class battleships on June 30th, 1919. From there, her construction continued at a steady, if not the fastest, pace, as she was launched on September 1st, 1921. At this point, Washington entered her fitting out stage as the early process that led to the Washington Naval Treaty began. Construction on Washington continued during these negotiations, and I have not seen any evidence it even really slowed down. Nonetheless, as her fitting out continued, Washington was living on borrowed time. When the Naval Treaty was signed on February 6, 1922, it ended almost all capital ship construction for the United States Navy. This would include USS Washington at 76% of the way towards completion. Okay, technically 75.9% if you want to be specific. 2 days after the treaty was signed on February 8th, Washington's construction halted. At this point, her fate may not have been entirely sealed, but it soon would be. Instead of finishing her completion, the Navy elected to finish her sister West Virginia instead. Washington, complete to the point where her armor and underwater protection were installed, languished dockside for a bit. Her ultimate fate would come in November of 1924, when she was towed out to sea as a gunnery target, after being stripped of anything valuable. The ship had all her armor in place, so she was perfect for testing and understanding how well American battleships actually stood up to enemy attack. One of the most modern battleships then in service, being expended this way, would serve to identify where improvements could be made for the future. As such, I can't really call her fate a waste, as there were important lessons to be learned here. Regardless, according to Friedman, the tests themselves were as follows. It began with 2 400-pound torpedo hits, followed by 3 2,000-pound near-miss bombs. These did less damage than might be expected, as Washington evidently remained afloat for 3 days, in heavy seas, without any repairs being performed. During this, she only developed a list of 3 degrees, which is impressive considering the lack of damage control. After this, she was subjected to 14 14-inch shells being dropped upon her from 4,000 feet. Only one of these shells actually penetrated her deck, as it would turn out. I have also seen reference to 400 pounds of TNT being detonated aboard her during this process, though the closest I see in Friedman's book is, and I quote, "There were contact explosions by the standard US charge of 400 pounds of TNT. No mention of exactly how that was done." In any event, the final test that Washington was subjected to came on November 25th, though I've also seen the date of November 26th being thrown around in some sources. In this, she was fired upon by the 14-inch guns of USS Texas, and possibly USS New York, though again, sources vary. Another 14 14-inch shells, fired from guns this time, sent Washington to the bottom. These tests prompted the Navy to consider the existing deck armor of their battleships inadequate, in spite of the good showing against the airdrop shells. Furthermore, there was a desire that future battleships must be fitted with triple bottoms for further underwater protection. The Navy also took the lesson from this that a modern battleship could withstand 8 torpedo hits, provided they were well distributed, which is an interesting number in light of the 7 torpedoes that West Virginia would take at Pearl Harbor, which were admittedly not well distributed and in fact all hit fairly close together on one side of the ship. That is where the firm historical data ends, though, so let's move to speculation time for those interested in it. As I brought up in the West Virginia video, my current theory is that the decision to expend Washington and keep West Virginia likely came down to construction time, with perhaps a side of pragmatic decision making. To elaborate on that here, let's look at the Colorado class as a whole. Washington and Colorado were both built by New York Shipbuilding and were both quite a bit slower to build than their sisters. Colorado was laid down on May 29, 1919, and launched just shy of 2 years later on March 22, 1921. Her fitting out process would take even longer, as she only commissioned on August 30, 1923, almost 2.5 years later. Washington, as noted earlier in the video, was laid down on June 30, 1919, and launched on September 1, 1921. That was right in line with Colorado's speed from keel laying to launching, just a bit above 2 years instead of a bit below 2 years. This is where it gets a bit murky, though. By February of 1922, Washington was 76% complete, with all of her armor and torpedo protection fitted. That's 5 months after her launching, and does raise the question of how long it might have taken to finish the remainder of the work. As for the other pair of ships, Maryland and West Virginia were both built by Newport News Shipbuilding. While Maryland was the first of the class laid down on April 24, 1917, she ended up taking the longest from keel laying to launching. She only entered the water on March 20th, 1920, almost a full 3 years later, albeit with a good chunk of that time being taken up, in all likelihood, by wartime construction needs. What's interesting to note here is that she commissioned on July 21, 1921. It took a little under a year and a half to finish her fitting out process. That is substantially faster than Colorado, or West Virginia for that matter. And on that topic, West Virginia was laid down in April 1920 and launched in November 1921. She took over a year and 7 months to enter the water. Washington took 2 years and 2 months. As a result, one can see that West Virginia was moving at a faster pace than Washington and Colorado. Her commissioning would only come on December 1st, 1923, though, which means her fitting out process took a good 2 years. This is where we come into it was faster to build West Virginia, and also a pragmatic decision. West Virginia was certainly faster to get into the water, and by quite a good margin as well. Was she faster to fit out, though? If you look at shipbuilders, Maryland indicates that it would probably be a yes, but at the same time, how long would the remaining 24% of Washington's construction really have taken? Would it have been quicker than West Virginia at that point? Maybe. It would make sense that Washington was canceled because the Navy looked at the respective progresses of Colorado and Maryland and decided that Newport News would finish their second battleship faster. There's another angle here, though, that might further explain things. Remember that Washington was complete up to the point where she would be a perfect target ship, but no further. One can make a compelling argument, though again this is just speculative, that the Navy chose to keep West Virginia instead of Washington because it was cheaper to expend Washington where she was in her construction instead of finishing West Virginia to a similar point. And in both cases, it was more worth the money already sunk into these ships than just scrapping one of them with the glut of scrap material already entering the market from the other treaty victims. Or if you prefer this, if we already have to get rid of one of these ships, might as well use the one we can immediately expend as a target to test how good our ships really are. Or something along those lines anyway. As such, looking at what material I can dig up on the topic, I do currently lean towards this conclusion. West Virginia was faster to get into the water, and that might have continued to be faster to commission if one looks at Colorado and Maryland as examples of what their respective shipbuilders could muster. However, it is equally as likely that Washington was chosen to be expended because it was cheaper that way than building West Virginia up to the same condition before expending her instead. There might also have been some treaty issues with trying to continue building a ship against the restrictions, intending to use her as a target or not. Speed of construction and brutal pragmatism. It fits in a way, doesn't it? No matter what the truth is, though, at least USS Washington got to go out in a useful way, opening up her name for her far more famous successor. That's not a bad fate as these things go. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you in the next one.